watching Bengals Breakdown by Chat Sports, and I am your host, Stone Shields. Welcome into this at-home edition of Bengals Breakdown. Hope you all are having a fantastic Sunday. Coming up on today's show, we're going to be talking about Trey Hendrickson a little bit, of course, Shemar Stewart as well, and kind of closing out the show with some offensive line conversation. Obviously, it's a slow month here in July. Not a whole lot going on, but still some significant off-the-field issues that are trying to be worked through when you're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. But make sure you guys hit that sub button if you haven't done so already. That's youtube.com/BengalsTV. We will have videos for you guys all off season long and all season long as well. Approaching that 20,000 subscriber mark here at the channel, something we're trying to accomplish before the season gets underway, before the preseason gets underway, ideally, here at the channel. So help us out. Don't miss out on any Cincinnati Bengals coverage. Hit that sub button for me right now. All right, so let's start with Trey Hendrickson. Here on today's show, obviously, Hendrickson is looking to get a new contract, is still under contract with the Cincinnati Bengals for an additional year, but he's looking to get that massive payday. And obviously, the play on the football field that he has shown over the past couple of years does not really equate to what the contract is in which that he is getting. And he wants that number to go up significantly. And he's looking at a guy like Myles Garrett that is also a little bit up there in age. He's getting $40 million per year, saying, well, I've had 17 and a half sacks these past two seasons. Why can't I get my money? And Mina Kimes made an interesting comment the other day on her podcast saying that she feels that Trey Hendrickson has all the leverage in the world, which I really don't get that take, to be completely honest with you. I get what she's saying from a football perspective, but this is a guy that is still under contract. And Cincinnati, as we've talked about in the past on this show, they're kind of getting crushed by the national media for doing a really good contract, right? This is a guy that they got in free agency, the best free agent signee in the history of the franchise, and they knocked it out of the park, and they're getting incredible value for a low price. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, that's not fair to Trey Hendrickson. He deserves more money. Fair, but Cincinnati's kind of getting dragged for this whole thing when really, at the end of the day, they just kind of had a really nice contract when it comes to Trey Hendrickson. So we'll see, obviously, in the coming days if the Bengals pivot. Obviously, this is an organization that is, known for being stubborn, and there's been several events throughout the history of the organization that kind of have documented this. But Trey Hendrickson is hoping that things obviously change, and ultimately he gets the contract in which he is seeking. Of note, Joe Burrow really went to the table for Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins kind of was saying, hey, they really need to get paid. T's a need, right? Obviously, everyone understands what Jamar is. And he's done similar things for Trey Hendrickson, but not nearly to the same degree as what he did for his receivers. I had talked about on this show that I think the best course of action for Trey Hendrickson is to get Joe Burrow to go out there and really go to bat for him, because it seems like the Bengals only pivot off their stubbornness when Joe Burrow goes up there and bangs the table. But Joe Burrow's done that a little bit, but nothing crazy, and obviously no contract is done at this point for Trey Hendrickson. So it's just kind of a waiting game, and it's going to be whoever blinks first kind of situation here. This is going to drag through training camp, I am sure, and kind of be a distraction for this team this offseason. But as Joe Burrow pointed out earlier in the offseason, one distraction is certainly a lot better than three, and obviously there was multiple distractions last year with the wide receivers in Hendrickson as well. It's all part of the NFL. Hopefully the team and Trey Hendrickson can work through it. And I'm kind of on the fence in terms of, what can this team's ceiling be with or without Trey Hendrickson. There are some people out there nationally that say, no Trey Hendrickson, this team is not a Super Bowl contender, and with him they are. I don't really know exactly where I stand on that. Trey Hendrickson's an unbelievable player, but look at what the defense has done the past 2 years. They have not been good. Now, could they have been that much worse without Trey Hendrickson? Maybe, but part of me thinks that, some other guys could come in, younger guys, and they're not going to have the same production as Hendrickson, but if they can just get a little bit of production, the defense still has an opportunity to be competitive. And obviously, it's all about balancing how much of the pie everybody gets, right? Because you got Joe Burrow getting a big slice, Higgins and Chase now getting a big slice. Now Hendrickson wants a big slice of his own, and that's something that Duke Tobin in the front office have to work through. So let me know, do you think Trey Hendrickson will play in Week 1? Give me your thoughts in the comment section. Type Y for yes or N for no. He's threatened that he would hold out if he doesn't get a new contract. Do you think that actually will happen? Will he play in Week 1? Type Y for yes or N for no. Now something else here, that this one I wouldn't say it's more frustrating based on the player, but it's kind of more head scratching because it's a rookie, right? And now I want to be clear. Rookies have these issues with their contracts where this thing goes through training camp and there's no participation or what have you. But here with Cincinnati, it's really kind of looking a little bit dark when you're talking about Shemar Stewart. And obviously, there's been talks about, well, he hasn't signed the participation agreements. He doesn't want to go out there and practice without his contract in place. Mike Florio was reporting for NBC Sports that they wanted the participation agreement to look like what Amarius Mims' participation agreement looked like last year. And Shemar Stewart and his team were like, well, if that looks the same, why can't our contracts look the same as well? Thus, the staring contest between the Bengals and Shemar Stewart. And we will see if this thing gets resolved. But as the longer this goes on, the worse this looks for Shemar Stewart and the Cincinnati Bengals, right? Because this is your first round pick, right? It's a team that needed to hit their first round pick out of the park. They made a risky choice by taking Shemar Stewart, given the lack of production that he showed his 3 years at college, and then only 4.5 sacks, right? It's been well documented. And now he's sitting here in a spot where he's not even practicing with the football team, not getting those professional reps in. And this is a guy that they looked at to have an impact on this football team in 2025. And obviously, that has not happened to this point. And without the offseason workouts, perhaps without training camp as well, I don't think it's fair to suggest that there should be a high expectation for Shemar Stewart to come in and make an impact. Obviously, it's a position of need with or without Trey Hendrickson. And Shemar Stewart at this point has not been out there on the football field. No real updates in regards to that. I'm sure we'll continue to talk about it when training camp rolls around, but it seems like both of these sides have their feet dug in pretty significantly here when you're talking about the Bengals saying, nope, they want to reset this precedent with the language in his contract. And Shemar Stewart saying, this is ridiculous. I want to be treated like the rookies that you had drafted in previous years. And I do want to make note, we've mentioned this on the show before, but what the Bengals are doing is not abnormal, right? There's lots of players that have this kind of language in their contract. It's just the first time that Cincinnati is doing this in regards to a rookie contract. Shemar Stewart, his team, obviously are frustrated, and they don't want that language to be in there. Should there be a default in the contract, they still want their guarantees. They don't want those to be wiped. But void in contract, that would be a default in a contract would be, if something went wrong with Shemar Stewart off the football field. It has nothing to do with on-the-field injury. It's, troubles with the law or just, other defaults of the contract that are not getting hurt. And, you might scratch your head and say, well, why is he so, concerned about those guarantees? Why not just, do the things he's supposed to do and abide by the contract? There's definitely two sides to this, and this thing is far from over, in my opinion, and it's going to continue to drag out. But once it does get resolved, then it's like, okay, now this guy actually has to improve on the football field. It's going to be a process. And at this point, I would be surprised if he had a significant impact on this football team in 2025. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor just, need to do a little bit of work with him and the coaching staff, obviously, in order to get him in a place where he can contribute at a professional level. I'm a little skeptical that he's going to be able to do that here, especially if he's not playing in training camp in the preseason as well. Before we get out of here, do want to talk about the offensive line here. Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic, he points out that he does not expect the Bengals to bring in another guard. No free agents. The name Brandon Scherf has been tossed around since the end of the 2024 season, and it seems like Scott Peters, the offensive line coach for the Cincinnati Bengals, is pretty content with what they have along the offensive line at this point. So it looks like when you're talking about that right guard spot, you're talking about Lucas Patrick and you're talking about Cordell Volson and Cody Ford perhaps duking it out for that spot. And it seems like the left guard spot's going to be your draft pick out of Georgia, right? And obviously you got your guys, Dylan Fairchild is the name, of course, your draft pick out of Georgia in the third round. And then your tackles are kind of set in stone with Mims and Orlando Brown Jr., and so is Ted Karras there as well. But I think the offensive line certainly got a lot of hate last year. They're always going to have hate when Joe Burrow is taking sacks, but I also think it pretty clearly was the best offensive line that Joe Burrow has played with for the Cincinnati Bengals in his career. Obviously, new offensive line coach, Scott Peters. There's a lot of hype and excitement that come with that. hopefully he can get the most out of these guys, because when you sit out there and you say, yeah, we got Cody Ford, Cordell Volson, and Lucas Patrick vying for a starting guard spot, that doesn't exactly fill you with a lot of confidence when you're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals and, the Bengals fan base as well, because I think everybody was hoping they would kind of bring in more of a high-profile free agent to kind of come in and be a stopper for a year or two at that guard spot. But ultimately, does not look like that's going to happen. They're going to roll with what they got, and, if things go bad, injuries happen in training camp, it's ugly in the preseason, they'll look to add somebody else, but it doesn't look like that is their plan at this point to add along the offensive line. Do want to lastly point out Dylan Fairchild, who was, kind of sparring, wrestling with Sean Strickland, who's former UFC champion. Fairchild's going to be really, really good. I said when the Bengals picked him that he was my favorite draft pick. I still believe that. And this guy is going to be an incredible player, and he's really going to help solidify that left side of the offensive line, but obviously still more questions around that as well. That will do it for this at-home edition of Bengals Breakdown. We will be back with you guys again tomorrow with videos in the studio, so don't miss out. Hit that sub button for us right now, youtube.com/Bengals TV. And if you made it to the end of today's show, we appreciate it. Show your support by liking today's show for me right now.